And for more on the reactions to the film here in Southeast Asia, we are joined tonight by Dr. Sara Bazoobandi. She is a visiting research fellow at the Middle East Institute. And thanks for joining us on a Monday, Dr. Sara. All right, any surprises with the way Southeast Asian or some Southeast Asian countries reacted to this video?
Yeah, there has been some until probably earlier this afternoon today. There was a fairly moderate reaction, and I was quite surprised when I saw the latest headlines that there was a crisis in Jakarta, and it's heating up a little bit in comparison. The general understanding has been that the reaction in the Middle East, North African countries, been based on an anti-American sentiment which somewhat got stronger since the revolutions in the region, whereas this is not the case in Southeast Asia. And I was quite pleased when I saw earlier today that the Council of Ulama in Indonesia released a statement, and they actually invited people to calm down and do not overreact. But you know, inevitably, I guess there is this wave of anger getting through the Southeast Asian countries, and to the point that I heard that the American embassy in Thailand had even they are shutting down their operation. So this is quite unfortunate, but still, the events are unfolding.
All right, what do you think is driving the anger in Jakarta, for example? Do you think the protesters have actually seen this video in question?
That is a very good question. You know, perhaps it's understandable that in no standard nobody has the right to insult, you know, the religious belief of any minority or majority religions all over the world. And it's, you know, that by no means this is a representation of freedom of speech. If somebody wants to, you know, make a low budget, fairly empty. I mean, if anybody sees that film, I've just scanned through it earlier. It's a completely it sounds like a joke basically to me, you know, rather than something that one needs to take it as a serious offense. Nonetheless, this is something that can trigger people's anger, and I think now it's the critical role is on the important responsibility is on the shoulder of the religious leaders. We see that in the Middle East, for example, the leader of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, released a statement and called for a week of demonstration. This is overreaction, you know. For somebody who actually has the knowledge of Islamic faith, they should now try to calm the situation down, because the more chaos and you know, more killing and more
it just doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
But okay, the film was produced a long time ago. It only triggered this kind of reaction last week. The interim president of Libya said the Al-Qaeda could be behind all of it. Do you share the same sentiment?
It is very difficult to make such judgments, but what I see more important to do with, you know, which is something that has to do perhaps with this timing of this crisis, is perhaps the upcoming election in the United States. You know, this issue has raised a huge debate in U.S. domestic politics arena, and for example, the candidate from the Republican Party has announced that President Clinton's foreign policy for the Middle East has clearly failed.
President Obama.
Sorry, President Obama.
Right.
I'm really sorry. Has clearly failed, and the reason is that he's been always apologetic against the Middle Eastern governments and Middle Eastern people, whereas it shouldn't be the case. And his support for the overthrow of, you know, all these dictators of the region has done nothing but just creating more anger, and those people that we actually help them now are turning their back against us.
Anger, and they're not afraid of America anymore.
Precisely.
Is I think what I'm hearing there.
Yeah.
The White House still stands by that all these protests were because of this film and nothing else. Do you agree?
Well, it is, again, it's one of those situations that it's very difficult to make a judgment. It definitely raised anger. It has definitely, you know, prompted reactions by the religious conservative Islamist group across the world for very understandable reasons. But at the same time, one cannot really ignore the fact that how it's been utilized. If it wasn't ignited by the, you know, domestic politics leaders.
Should the U.S. government, should the White House then separate itself from this movie? or continue using it as this is the cause of all these anti-American hatred around the world?
Well, they are put in a position that there is very little for them to do at the moment. You know, I've read in the news that there's been a long negotiation that, for example, President-elect of Egypt refused to actually come out and condemn the act, but eventually they have to pull some threads from the White House and make them. So it is important, and somewhat an inevitable situation has been created that nobody really is happy about, but the only way to get out of it is just to try to calm the situation down, and obviously it's going to have costs for the current government in the United States.
All right, thank you very much for all your insights, Sara. Dr. Sara Bazoobandi there, research fellow at the Middle East Institute, joined me here on Think Tank. Elsewhere